Hello, my name is Patrick Hare. I am majoring in applied manufacturing, focused in design and automation. I'm here to present my senior project that I accomplished in lieu of an internship or co-op for the spring 2020 semester. I was assigned by Dr. Inglesby to Mr. Matthew Rosser. He is the director of Jacksonville State University's Center for Manufacturing Support, or CMS, to complete my senior project. I was also to report to a staff engineer, and his name is Mr. William Thornton. CMS is an entity of the Department of Applied Engineering. Its primary function is to provide manufacturing support to local and regional manufacturing companies, campus projects for Jacksonville State University, as well as applied manufacturing students that participate in the department's robotics team. I was tasked by Mr. Rosser to update and improve an outdated floor plan of the CMS manufacturing workshop using the AutoCAD modeling program. So as not to take credit for anyone else's work, the original floor plan was created and modeled by Mr. Chris Marker. A major portion of the updated floor plan is mine. However, there are some items from the original that I used in the updated version. The updated floor plan was required to have the following: detailed drawings of the equipment in block form, precise placement of the equipment that exists in the building, location of all electrical components such as electrical panels, disconnects, bus bars, transformers, and OSHA mandated workspaces. The locations of all fire emergency items like fire alarm pull stations, egress routes in the event of a fire, and all fire extinguishers. Location of the stairwells and approved safe walking paths. The floor plan must include multiple layers that would give the user ability to toggle between categories of the model. Some examples of those categories are equipment, fire, and electrical. I will discuss these in more depth momentarily. Finally, the updated version was to include drawing of all existing toolboxes and work tables. Let's take a look at the comparison of the original and the updated floor plans. Here we have the original floor plan. I apologize for its distorted look, but this is as zoomed in and sized as I could get the entire layout. Here's the updated version. Again, I apologize for the distortion. The next few slides are zoomed in to individual rooms in the building, so you can get a clear view of the floor plans. This is what I like to call the Haas CNC room. This is the original layout, and this is mine. As you can see, there's not a lot of difference between the original and the updated floor plans. This room has pretty much been unchanged over the last few years. And it's the same for the main bay. This is the original, and this is mine. And finally, what is now the 3D printing section. Note the robotics arms in this room. This is the original. And this one is mine. As you can see, the robotics equipment is not in my floor plan. The robotics lab was relocated to Ayers Hall, making room for numerous 3D printing equipment. As I mentioned before, I was required to have detailed drawings of all equipment in block form. The process in which I used to accomplish this was meticulous. I drew each piece of equipment in my notebook using a top view format, then measured every feature of every piece of equipment and recorded the measurements on my hand drawing. And finally, I modeled the equipment into AutoCAD based on my rendering. In all, I used this method and modeled or updated 40 out of 50 pieces of equipment, and the same for 15 toolboxes and work tables. On the left is a tubing bender that I had to draw from scratch. It was one of the pieces of equipment that I enjoyed modeling the most. Here are some examples of the equipment in the original floor plan that Mr. Marker modeled. Because they still exist in the building, I did keep these drawings in my updated floor plan. However, the Haas CNC machine to the right was updated slightly. In the original model, it did not have the air compressor or cutting oil filter that you see in the yellow box. I had to add them in. Here you can see a surface grinder. In the original drawing, it was represented by just a rectangle, but I was mandated to have detailed drawings, so I remodeled it. Here again, this is the original model of a wire EDM and my more detailed version. Every piece of equipment was drawn in block form. The sole purpose of this is to allow the user to easily move equipment within the floor plan. This feature will allow Mr. Rosser to easily rearrange the floor plan as it changes. It would also allow him to plan for new equipment or determine if he has the physical space for it. I saved each block in the program. Say a piece of equipment is removed from the floor plan because it is removed from the building. Having the block saved allows the user to pull from a library of block drawings to insert the equipment if it's ever brought back into the building, instead of having to draw it from scratch again. On the left is another piece of equipment that I had fun drawing. Here's a representation of what I mean by the user being able to easily move the equipment around in the floor plan. On the left is a mill that is not in block form. As you can see, I've selected a few of the lines that make up the drawing of the mill. I cannot select the whole model. In order to move the whole piece of equipment, the user would have to select about 40 individual lines to move it. You could use a selection pane and speed up the process, but I found that if the equipment is pretty close to another piece, you would accidentally grab a line from the other piece of equipment that you don't want. And because you can't deselect items, you would have to start all over again. On the right is the same mill drawn in block form. The user simply has to move the cursor over the mill and it selects the whole piece of equipment instead of the individual lines. After drawing the equipment, I had to make sure that it was in its current position in the workshop, as well as the safe walking paths, electrical work areas, and fire extinguishers. I took measurements from walls and other known points that allow me to find precise positions. As I mentioned before, the correct positioning of each item allows Mr. Rosser to determine available space in the shop for such things as acquiring new equipment or not because there isn't space for it. It would allow him to plan relocation of equipment if needed to purchase new equipment. It would also allow him to plan relocations to improve process flow. He could even make plans based on availability of power sources. In short, it's a powerful tool at his disposal. The last important feature required for the floor plan was that it had to be drawn using multiple layers. This feature allows the user to toggle on and off individual layers of the floor plan. The benefits of this are to reduce visual clutter and only see what is needed to be seen. It also would allow Mr. Rosser to print out and post egress routes for the workshop. The next slides will demonstrate what I mean by visual clutter. Again, I apologize for the distorted view. Let's zoom into the Haas CNC room once again. As you can see, this floor plan is a mess, and it's a bit confusing. You are left asking yourself, what is what? This is what the floor plan looks like with all the layers toggled on. I'll toggle off some of the layers so you can see what I mean by a clear view. Now that is better. This is the view with just the equipment and the equipment labels layer toggled on. And then next, here's the electrical layer. As you can see, it's got the electrical panels, disconnects, transformers, and the work clearance areas. Here's the fire layer. This layer shows the fire alarm pull stations, fire extinguishers, and the egress route. And finally, the safe walking paths. To wrap it up, this project took me more than 100 hours to complete. A few factors contributed to the amount of hours that it took to accomplish this task. First, it had been 3 years since I worked with the AutoCAD program, so it took me a little while to relearn it, and there was a lot of trial and error. Also, I was pretty much left to figure this project out on my own. I at first wasn't sure how to proceed in accomplishing the task. I decided that my best course of action was to remove all items from the floor plan and start from scratch. Another factor was my method of hand drawing, measuring, annotating, and then modeling the equipment, then measuring for the accurate positioning, and finally drawing the walking paths and fire egress routes because they did not exist on the original drawing. With that said, I feel that the main objective of an internship, co-op, or senior project is to solidify what we've learned during our time and study at Jacksonville and the Applied Manufacturing Department. I can honestly and truthfully say I accomplished that with AutoCAD. Thank you for your time. I now open it for questions.